Welcome to IVF This, episode 51, Anxiety and Control. Welcome to IVF This. I'm your host, Emily Ginn. I'm a mother to two beautiful and feral boys. I'm married to my favorite person in the world. I'm a social worker, a life coach, and an IVF warrior. I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and emotions during your IVF journey, to break free from anxiety and regain control of your life, even in the midst of infertility. I'm going to teach you to say IVF this to how we think about, talk about, and experience infertility. Let's go. Hello, my beautiful friends. I'm really excited to be talking to you all today, and not just because it's normally that I love talking to you guys, but today is a really important topic. There are fewer things that come up as often as anxiety and control when I work with my clients. I've mentioned this before, but anxiety and control are often inextricably linked. I think this also comes up a lot as we're kind of marching into the holiday season. There are a lot of opportunities for us to have anxiety-producing thoughts. And when we have anxiety-producing thoughts, we also have the desire to control things, particularly around family get-togethers. Some cycles and transfers have been delayed until after the new year, and that can be so challenging. And just dealing with family, dealing with the logistics of holidays, things like that. For most of us, where there is anxiety, again, there is a need to control. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, before I start, I want to remind you all that anxiety is like any other emotion, sadness, happiness, whatever. It is all part of the human experience. Anxiety has kept us safe in so many ways. It really is the main reason we have survived as a species. So we don't need to go crapping all over it. It's just that it doesn't particularly feel that great. So we tend to try to resist it, avoid it, or react to it. All three of those things are pretty normal responses. This is how most of us manage. Well, I can't really say that we're managing, like I've got air quotes around the word managing, because resisting, avoiding, and reacting are not really managing our emotions. It's really delaying them and numbing them. But that is how we have been taught. All that to say, I don't ever want to give the impression that we need to villainize any emotion, particularly anxiety. It is not the bad guy of the story, ever. It just is. It's like the weather. The more we learn about anxiety and how to allow for and process feelings, that's when you have the opportunity to change your experience of it. And that's really the goal. We don't want to have a death grip on us, and that's why we want to change our experience of it. Now, regardless of each of your situations, we all have anxiety. Cycles, family, friend appointments, medications. Hell, the pandemic is still going on and on and on and on and on. We have a lot of opportunities to have thoughts that create anxiety. We have all felt it. Most of us are probably actively feeling it. This is not the first time, nor will it ever be the last time in your life that you experience anxiety. I think a lot of us walk around, I know I sure as hell do, with this belief that once I get past this thing, whatever this thing may be, then I will get to feel better. I won't have the weight of this thing any longer, so I will get to feel better. I see that a lot with my clients talking about once they get pregnant, then they won't have to feel so anxious because then they will finally have gotten where they wanted to be. It's not true. Spoiler alert, it's not true. Not even a little bit. Our anxiety literally just shifts. It morphs into something new based on the change of circumstances. When our circumstances change, we have new opportunities to think new thoughts, and therefore we will have new opportunities to feel anxious. This is just how our brains work. So when this happens to you, you're not doing anything wrong. There is nothing wrong with you. It is simply a question of learning why your brain does this. This helps us to normalize the experience. And then we can get to work helping yourself to manage your mind. It's funny, when I was thinking about this and how I kind of wanted to explain it, I was actually going for a walk and I noticed that the leaves are starting to change color. Well, as much as the leaves change color in Central Texas, I lived in Virginia for 1 year, and let's just say those leaves know how to put on a show. Anyway, I was walking and I was thinking about why we hold so tightly to control and why it's so closely tied to anxiety. There are two things that we try to control, right? People and outcomes. So I will be talking about both. I'll talk about it within the context of IVF, but I'm also going to zoom out and talk about it in the broader context of just living your life. I mean, every day, outside of infertility and IVF, we have tons of things we try to control. So I think taking a wide-angle lens on this topic is really important. Now, while walking, I started to think about this cliche. I think I had heard it earlier in the day and it just stuck with me. It's not the first time I heard it, but I think it was on Pinterest or something. The only thing permanent is impermanence. The idea that this world keeps turning, life comes and goes, as it always does. I think seeing ourselves in that part of the cycle of life, I'm not going to start singing Elton John's Lion King song. Believe me, you don't want to hear me sing, but this is all part of the circle of life. I couldn't resist it. I'm sorry. You can judge me all you want. But seeing ourselves as part of this cycle is very grounding for me. The earth turns, people come and go, species come and go. Oh, it's interesting. I heard another coach one day say, the earth has no investment in us particularly, which I kind of like. Like, I'm just here. It is very grounding to me. We are always part of this cycle that is birthed and then dies, always. And the trees turn over, the seasons change, the animals come and go, humans come and go. So remembering that I am part of that, for me, it helps me take off the focus from myself. This sort of primitive brain, animal-based focus that we all have on just ourselves and our own survival, which is really the source of so much anxiety. It helps me to reconnect with what is, in my belief, the truth of life, which is that it's beautiful because it's impermanent. Life is precious to us because it is a finite, a limited resource. So today I want to teach you about one of the main ways that I think that we block ourselves from being at peace with that impermanence, even though impermanence is the truest state of our lives. And this is why we try to control things that are beyond our control. This is the best way to screw up our joy and peace in any given moment. And one of the paradoxes I see is how we kind of incorrectly think about the world. And that's that we think that we don't have control over our own thoughts and feelings. Like, that doesn't even occur to most of us. We are so focused on how outside circumstances create our thoughts and our feelings because that is what we have been taught, right? We think that outside circumstances will always control us. So the thought of it being within our control, how we think, how we feel, and how we act, because those three things are always tethered together, it doesn't even occur to us. Not because we're stupid or anything else, but that is just not how we're taught. This is not what is modeled to us growing up. And so as a result, we run around trying to control everything that is outside of us. Other people, external things, anything literally that we cannot control because we're not focused on the right thing. So why do we do that? Guys, I spent the vast majority of my life trying to do this. I am a recovering control freak. Almost recovered. It's early in my process, but I recognize how counterproductive and how much it doesn't work, because it actually works the exact opposite. It's totally backwards. So why is it so seductive to try to do that? Why do we get so sucked into it? And I think there are a couple of reasons. The first is because we think we know what should happen. We think we know how life should be. We think we know how other people should act. We think we know that if life would just be the way we want it to be and other people would just act the way we want them to act, then we would get to feel okay. I think this is something that all of us kind of intellectually tell ourselves, that we don't know what's going to happen and that we don't have control of other people. But that's very different from being convinced that we know what should happen and that we know how people should behave. That kind of sits back there in the back of our brains like, yeah, I get it. I don't really know. I'm not really in charge, but this thing should absolutely happen this way. It should totally go down this way. And we will always dream and imagine those things going in our favor based on our own preferences and bias, and honestly, in kind of a vacuum of perfection. We're always just trying to get a feeling, trying to chase a feeling. And 99.9% of the time, we want that feeling to be positive or comfortable. So let's zoom out again from IVF and infertility. If you read a news article about people not behaving the way you think they should, about the pandemic, about vaccines, about political parties, anything, of course, your brain has a lot of logical reasons, even you might believe principled reasons about this. But on an emotional level, what is happening is that when you see them doing that, you have a thought that makes you feel anxious, afraid, sad, pissed off, whatever it is. And then you think, well, if they would just stop doing that, I wouldn't have to have this thought. Or, well, if this thing had just happened this way, then I wouldn't have to have this thought or this feeling. You are creating your own negative emotion with your thought about whatever other people are doing or saying, and then you just want to get rid of the emotion. And so you think, if they would just stop, then I could feel better. But the opposite is true. When you want life to be something it isn't, when you want other people to be or act differently than they are, when you want the world to be different than it is, you are creating so much suffering for yourself. You are resisting reality. You are arguing with reality. I'm pretty sure I've said this before on the podcast, and I know I tell every single one of my clients, but Byron Katie is one of my favorite teachers. And one of my favorite quotes from Byron Katie is, when you argue with reality, you lose, but only 100% of the time, which I love. Now, of course, I'm not talking about not having a vision of a world that you want or a life that you want and taking action to change or create that life or that world. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about not wanting to show up for yourself in a certain way or to trying to make changes to better your life or the world around you. But when you are emotionally resisting that the world is not already the way you want it, exactly the way you want it, it's almost like we feel entitled to the world being the way we think is best, which is kind of crazy when you think about it, because there are almost 7 billion people in this world. Every single one of us is going to have a different idea of what that should look like. Because you can't get people to agree on anything about how the world should be, from the most macro level to the most micro level. We can't agree on a political system, what that should look like. We can't agree on how businesses should be run, based on some of the emails and DMs that I get. We can't agree on what to have for lunch. We can't agree on what we should do with this world. Humans do not agree on stuff. And so when we think we're entitled for the world to just already be the way we want it to be, and we resist the reality that it's not, and I'm talking about all the way from, again, the most macro level global health conditions, or what your partner said to you before you left for work today. When you are emotionally resisting reality, you are believing that you know better how things should be. Guys, I can't even tell you how much suffering that causes. Because you don't. There are billions of humans on this earth with billions of ideas of how things should be. And we're never going to get an ultimate checklist that tells us who is right and who is wrong. And the problem with thinking you know how things should be is that it's so incredibly painful when the world and the people won't cooperate with you. And unfortunately, normally, the world and the people do not cooperate with you. It usually will not be the way you want it to be. And so believing that it has to be for you to feel okay. Like, do you see how that can be so damaging, creates so much suffering for you? Giving the outside world the power over your feelings is going to make you obsessed with how the world should be different, with how your life should be different. The truth is that it's your own thoughts that are causing your feelings. And in fact, the resistance to the feeling about the world and your thoughts about your life and what should and should not be happening is what's causing your suffering. That's the paradox. If you stop believing that the world should be different, that your life should be different, then you don't need to change it to feel better. You'll feel better already. You've changed the premise, the basis of the thought. This is also true when it comes to trying to control how other people think or feel or act. I think we're so often convinced of the righteousness of our own beliefs, and we genuinely believe that we're looking out for other people's interests. We believe that their lives would be better if they just did what we told them to do. This is the truth that I need spoken to all the time. I think we believe that crap. We know it. And that's at any scale. We can be mad at everyone we see in the news or on the street or in our families or our friends who we don't think is doing the right thing at any point in their lives, right? Pandemic, in their work, in their family, in their partnership. We can be mad at friends and family for making some of the most offhanded, maybe inappropriate comments. There's no situation of other people's actions too large or too small for us to not get emotionally invested in and think that we know better. But whenever we believe we know how things should be or how people should act, we are setting ourselves up for so much suffering because, again, they almost never comply because they have different thoughts than we do. I know it's so rude, so very rude, but it's the truth. Just like there's no situation too big or too small that we won't be emotionally invested in and think we know how it should turn out. We're always setting ourselves up for that letdown, that anger, that sadness, whatever emotion. Now, I'm not saying that if a cycle fails, a transfer fails, you have a loss, you're not allowed to have feelings about it. Not at all. Grief is a natural byproduct. It's expected in those situations. But it's when you have the idea that it shouldn't have happened that way, or this or that should have happened. That's what I'm talking about. That's where we get into trouble. Think about when you have a thought about a situation that you think is the right thought. You have a situation in your life or in the world, and you have a belief about it, and you are convinced of your own righteousness in that belief. How receptive are you when other people try to change your mind or tell you what to do? I don't know about you guys, but I'm not receptive at all. It goes both ways. So even if you know just with absolute certainty that you are right, even if we could get a certified letter from the universe, it would just create unnecessary suffering to believe that you're right and other people should agree with you. Because we all have autonomy. We all have free will. And we all get to have our own thoughts, feelings, and actions. Aunt Greta gets to say and do whatever she wants because even if it's the most ridiculous, inappropriate, ill-timed, whatever comments or actions, it's okay because everything is subjective. To her, it might be her quote-unquote truth or a joke that she thinks is funny or something that's completely appropriate. You are not the reference point for how people should act or communicate. most of us, we want all the autonomy for ourselves, but we don't want other people to have it. Maybe like not overtly, you wouldn't say that, but low-key, that's kind of how we are. But then it doesn't work that way. We all get it or none of us have it. And the truth is we all have it. So the faster you can stop believing that you know for sure what other people should think, feel, or do, the less stressed out you're going to get when you're not able to control those things. And it's so important to remember that you want to control them because of how you think you will get to feel. I know you probably have a lot of really legitimate sounding reasons that your brain offers you. It's for their own good. It's for the good of the family. It's for public safety, whatever the thought is. But whatever we want, it's because of how we think we will get to think and feel. So we want our partners to handle a situation at work the way we think we would solve it. So they will stop being stressed out about it. So we can stop worrying about them being stressed. Or we want everyone to participate in social distancing or get vaccines or not get vaccines exactly the way that we would at an exact level of accommodation we've decided that would be safest or provide the most freedom, whatever it is, because we think we will get to feel safer or more in control of our health and our loved ones. Whenever you are trying to control someone or something outside of you, it is always because of how you think you would get to feel if the world or that person just cooperated to create the circumstance that you want. And that's important to know. Whatever your cover reason, whatever your brain tells you about it and why it's true, sincere, factual, people get to do whatever they want. It's always going to be based on your thinking and your feeling and not an objective truth. It doesn't matter if your brain says no. It's really about the future. It's always in this moment because of how you think you would feel if you could have a different thought or a different circumstance. But the good news is that you can always have a different thought by choosing a different thought on purpose. And the paradox is that the more you try to control people or situations around you, the more out of control you will feel. I'm sure you have all noticed this. If you tell yourself the truth, nothing feels more out of control than trying to control something or someone you cannot control. The harder you grip, the more it squirms away, the worse you feel. It feels desperate and scary and terrible. I do not recommend it. 10 out of 10, do not recommend. Or 0 out of 10, whatever that scale would be. I recommend focusing all of that energy and brain power on what you can control, which is your mind. The best news that I can give you is that you are wrong about what needs to happen for you to feel better. I know that sounds strange, but other people do not have to change what they're doing. External circumstances, no matter what it is, do not have to change. I'm not saying feel better as if feel happy all the time. That's not the point of life. But to stop feeling this out of control experience that you have when you're trying to control things you can't. What has to change is your thoughts. We want to control things and people so we can feel safe. But safety is an emotion created by your thoughts. It's not created by what other people or the world do or don't do. You can imagine someone who becomes paranoid about their safety and their life gets smaller and smaller by increasing degrees. They don't ever get to the point where they feel safe by just taking more and more actions to try to feel safer. Instead, what happens is they train their brain to look for danger. And then they keep finding smaller and smaller threats to be terrified of. I'm going to go into this in a little bit more detail in an upcoming episode on fear and safety. So I want you to check that out. It's coming out in a few weeks. So you can't control your actions or other people as a way to feel safe or free or happy or peaceful or whatever emotion you're chasing. But you can achieve those feelings by relinquishing the idea that you can or should be able to control anything outside of you. You can certainly take actions that can help produce a certain outcome more or less likely as far as you can see, but you still can't control any of that. And your perspective is limited anyway. So much is unforeseen or turns out differently than we wanted or ends up being exactly what needed to happen. Now, this comes up a lot in transfers and in stimulation cycles. What we have control over, medications, going to our doctor's appointment, avoiding alcohol and recreational drugs while we're in the midst of things, right? Those are the things that we have control over. And that's what I mean by taking action to help get to a certain outcome. But it doesn't guarantee the outcome, right? As so many of us know, being quote unquote perfect, which doesn't exist, but doing everything that we're supposed to do does not necessarily guarantee the outcome. But it is the only thing that was within our control. So instead of trying to control other people or outcomes around you so that you feel whatever you want to feel, you look for how you could feel by releasing the attempt to control. And I call it an attempt to control on purpose because you're not really releasing control because you never had it to begin with. It's releasing the erroneous, the false belief that you have control. I'm having weird Jurassic Park flashbacks. You never had control. When you accept that you can't control other people or the world around you, you will feel so much freer. And then you can ask yourself a much more useful and important question, which is, how do I want to show up? How do I want to take care of myself right now? Knowing that I can't control other people or the world, who do I want to be in this world? And in my relationships with people, in my relationship with myself. What kind of thoughts do I want to think? What kind of feelings do I want to create? What kind of actions do I want to take? What kind of results do I want to create for myself in my life? Those are always the things you can control. And focusing on who you want to be and how you want to show up in a world full of people and things you can't control, damn, that's the most empowering thing you can do. And that's what I encourage you to think about the next time you find yourself trying to control the world or other people or being mad and pissed off that you can't. How can you flip that mirror to see yourself more clearly and choose who you want to be on purpose today and every day? And that is what I have for you, my beautiful friends. I will talk to you next time. Have a wonderful week. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and follow to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you want to learn more, head over to www.ivfthiscoaching.com to learn how to work together.